Welcome back to Mainstream PC everyone, my name is Julian and in this video we're gonna go small because all the components you see over here are gonna go in there. Alright, so this month for my monthly build I'm going in the ITX form factor, and just to explain, this build has a purpose. It's not just a build like I usually do just to try out different components and stuff. This is actually going to be a personal rig. This is going to be my portable gaming rig. So I do have an existing rig that I have in a Cooler Master 690 version 3, a huge full tower case, which it's been a bit of a problem because sometimes I just want to leave the living room with my gaming computer without having to worry about save files transferring or whatever, and while for example my daughter and my wife are taking nap time on the weekends and I just want to play something for an hour real quick, then I want to be able to pick this up and just take it to whichever room I'm gonna play in. So that's the purpose of this build, and that's why I went with an ITX form factor and why I chose a case with handles as well. So let's start off by talking about the case primarily because with most ITX builds this is what it's really about. This is the, what's it called, ZenZone ArtWorld B2 Plus. So ZenZone ArtWorld, or ZZAW as I will call them from here on forth in the video, is a Chinese brand. It's one of these brands that you're not sure is it going to exist in a year or two, but they seem to be making pretty solid designs. That being said, designs, right? So even in the Taobao listing, oh yeah, by the way, Chinese brand, so Taobao, AliExpress, Banggood, those are the kind of places you'll find this kind of case. Even in the Taobao listing, in the item header or description, not even the description text, but in the actual name of the thing, it mentions the Geek A60. So it's obviously taking some inspiration from that case. But with that being said, there's two different types of this B2 case, the regular B2 and the B2 Plus. This is the B2 Plus, which is about 2 inches taller on the top than the regular B2, and this is to accommodate a 240 millimeter AIO. So this is also what I'll be using. So yeah, let's take off the side panel so we can have a real quick look at some of the things. One thing I noticed straight off the bat when I got this case, when it was shipped to me, it was nicely packaged and all, but the side panels here, which you can also order in aluminium, by the way, so they'll not be see-through, they'll also be anodized aluminium just like the rest of the case. I figured I'll for now stick with the acrylic ones and see how they serve me, especially since I got some RGB going on. But these acrylic side panels were a little bit cut too large in my opinion. They were a little too long actually on this side. I already sanded them down. So what happened is when they were transported, they started warping. And when I got them, they were pretty badly bent, like to a point where they would just like bend in and kind of like this, like in this direction as well. So what I had to do for about a month, I had to put like some weights on them, like put some paper in between them, put weights on them, and just let them flatten out. So now both, the other one is off actually, both are relatively flat again. So that's maybe something to consider. By the way, this acrylic is frosted, so it will never be completely clear. So that's that. Let's have a quick look at the case itself. So it's all anodized aluminium with the exception of the handles, which I'm not sure if they're brushed aluminum or or if it's steel, but I think it's actually aluminum as well. But the rest is anodized aluminum, and it's got like a pull-out tray. So this entire thing, this entire inner structure is just sitting on studs here, and it can be unscrewed and pulled out completely. So for assembly you can just do everything outside. And it's also, I'm not sure if the regular B2 has the option, but I do think so. It also has the option to move one plate away from here and move it down here and basically seat the entire structure on a second set of studs a little higher. The purpose of that is you can basically raise this up a little bit, so if you don't need as much space on the top, then you can have more space on the bottom. So you can actually mount a regular 25mm thick fans on the bottom and on the top, at least in the B2 Plus, and actually have a 4-fan full airflow bottom to top airflow path, which I've very much been considering actually doing, but I do have an AIO plan for this, so and I don't really have a low profile cooler at the moment that I could use for testing this. But I think with an, I'm not sure if an NH, what's it called, L12 would actually fit in here, but an L9 would definitely fit, or maybe something like an Thermaltake AXP100, something like that I believe would fit in here as well, in terms of height clearance. So, or you can just hot rod it and leave the side panel off and put the tower cooler on this side, just sticking out like that. But yeah, essentially the airflow variant of this without a liquid cooler is also very interesting, because I think it would improve thermals for a graphics card particularly, since the graphics card is going to be sitting on this side. And I'm going to actually install one fan here. You can see, maybe, I'm not sure if it's going to show up on camera very well, the cutout here is a little taller. So actually they say you can technically put a 3.5-inch drive here, but I think you'll really be struggling with routing the cables from the SFX power supply. But yeah, technically you can. It also has here, next to the motherboard, which will be sitting here, it has the option to mount a 2.5-inch drive. We're actually not going to mount any drives in there, no internal drives, except for the M.2, which is going to sit directly on the motherboard. So I should have plenty of space. And as for the graphics card, I'm not exactly sure what the clearance limit for it is, because everything is in Chinese. I think it's over 300mm. I will show you which graphic card I'm going to put in there, because I'm going to reuse it from my old rig and I don't really need too much graphics power for this one. But I do have an RTX 3080 sitting around, and we are going to try to put it in here. So look forward to that towards the end of the video, or yeah, whenever I'm going to cut it in. I think it should fit, at least the Asus TUF model that I have. I think it should manage to clear. So that would be interesting to see, but I don't think it's a particularly good idea if you're going to keep the side panels on. If you're going to take them off, once you hot rod the ITX build, as soon as it's got access to air, it's really not an issue at all. And this one has pretty good ventilation on the bottom and top. You can see the feet, which is just bent aluminum, which I do quite like, but I hope it's gonna sit very completely flush on an even surface. It's got enough clearance to actually provide pretty good air access. So yeah, that's really nice. The bottom one is also not this mesh pattern that we have on the top, like the cheese grater Mac style. So it's actually got even better access to air, because there's just holes, no second layer that's interfering with the airflow. So that's really nice. Other than that, yeah, SFX power supply, like with the space that we have available and with an AIO in here, there's really no space. I'm not sure if an SFXL, I think an SFXL should also fit, but ATX is absolutely a no-go. Other than that being said, yeah, let's have a quick look at front I/O, or even at the front. So the front is not open, it's just this painted on kind of style, kind of like a design copy of a little bit of this cheese grater style, but it's just printed on the aluminum. And we have handles, as said, and we have front I/O, which is just USB 3.0, I believe, 2 ports. And this is one of the things I hate the most about this case already. This button sits in here quite loose, like you can hear it rattling around. It's bothering me now, but it was probably not going to bother me in the future. So it's not, there's no gaps around it, or not huge gaps, it's just a little wobbly. That's it for the case. Again, ZZAW B2 Plus ITX case. If you're looking for it, I'll put some links in the description below. They do have some very good depictions of what individual settings and where each bracket and stuff goes. Oh yeah, by the way, talking about brackets, for the AIO installation, they actually do provide brackets for that as well. Sorry for the noise. So we got this and this, which you mount the AIO to this, and then you stick it in, and you mount these from the side. We'll show it in the video. Oops. So that's that. I'm not entirely sure what this bracket is for, but I might have to investigate. Oh, maybe for the fans in between. Would kind of make sense. Would it? I guess so. Maybe I can put it between the fan. There's really no point for this, is there? Oh, does it have a clip? No. I don't know. This one I'm not sure about. But yeah, that's it for the case. Let's get on to the next component. So for motherboard, I decided to go with the Fatality ASRock B450 Gaming ITX AC. Again, this is my own build, so I'm very budget oriented. For this is also a gaming rig that really doesn't have to be able to do anything other than drive frames. So B450 board with half decent VRM is plenty good for me. It was kind of a cheap deal for me, because the guy, apparently coronavirus is a good time to go second-hand PC hardware hunting, you know. A lot of people apparently during the middle of this year tried to start ITX projects and cancel them, because even my power supply, completely new. This is also was completely new, was unused. There wasn't a CPU socketed in here for sure. The bag was sealed, and the guy had to sell it to me for 30% less than he paid for it. So I did not particularly mind. And it's gonna serve me well in this rig. VRMs on this, as said, are half decent. It's got onboard Wi-Fi, which is nice, because as I'll be moving it around, I won't have access to Ethernet everywhere. And that's really all I have to say about it. As you see, it's actually fairly new. It's definitely not an old board, because it's already Ryzen 3000 ready. So again, it was new. I can say for sure he even gave me the receipt. So that's that. For CPU, I'm going with a Ryzen 3700X. The reason being, I think 8 cores is going to be the sweet spot for the next few years for gaming, because consoles are running on 8 CPU cores in the next generation. So this kind of does everything I need. I don't need super high frame rates. I'm usually playing at 1440p, which usually means I'm GPU bound anyway, so this is more than enough. The only thing is, for an ITX case, these do push a little bit of heat. That's why I was looking for an ITX case that had AIO support. So that's why. For RAM, I decided to go with this Thermaltake Z1 RGB kit. It's 2x8 16 gigabytes at rated XMP profile of 3200 MHz at CAS latency 16. It's pretty much what you get from almost every manufacturer nowadays, like as a fairly easy to bin profile or XMP profile. I think there are Samsung B dies. It's been a long time since I tested this kit. I've been actually having this laying around for 3 or 4 months. Yeah, I hope I can actually get it to 3200 MHz CL14 maybe, or 3600 MHz CL16, 18. Let's see how well this kit will do. One thing I do like about it is the RGB. It's actually quite pleasing to me. Very simple, nothing too fancy, nothing too bland. You can somewhat see the individual lights, but with the frosted side panels, I don't think it would be an issue anyway. But I'm not too fussed about the RGB in the first place, but it's nice to have. So that's the reason. For CPU cooling, I decided to go with the permafrost model again from Silverstone. In this case, the 240mm, because that's all I can fit. But even so, for 3700X, I wouldn't really use a larger model anyway. That being said, I used the 360mm one in my previous build, in the big boy build, or previous monthly build to be exact. And I was very happy with the performance per dollar that it delivered in thermal performance. So yeah, I decided why not go with it in my personal rig as well. And yeah, the ARGB is a nice bonus. So yeah, that's the reason why I chose this one. For storage, I decided to go with something that just suits my needs. So this isn't even an NVMe drive, this is just a SATA M.2 SSD. But honestly, I personally, for gaming, cannot tell the difference. I can't tell the difference between load times on a SATA SSD versus a NVMe SSD. And honestly, even if it's a couple of seconds, it makes no difference to me. So I decided, okay, I'll get this one second hand. Guy bought it, never used it. I verified it was started up twice, and both times was from me so far. And yeah, 2 terabytes for a pretty killer price. Again, this is the reason why I chose it. And M.2 form factor in an ITX case is always nice to have, because then you won't have to scrounge for space. And I wasn't really sure if this case could even accommodate an SSD at the time, so, or a 2.5-inch SSD. So that's the reason why I picked this one. So for graphics card, I decided to reuse what I had. This is the MSI GTX 1070 Ti Armor. It's a terrible card. In my opinion, it's one of the worst 1070 models that exists out there. But again, I bought this card 2 years ago. Used, secondhand. Was probably mined on, I didn't care, really. But it was such a good deal that even today, even after these cards released, Pascal cards like the 1070 are still selling for more on average than I got this card for. And that's a quite decent performance. I think it's almost 10% over the 1070, 8%, something like that in the 1070 Ti. So it was a great deal, and I honestly could compromise for having a bit of a hotter model. But it's gonna maybe kick me in the butt now in this case. I might have to hot rod the case if this becomes an issue on thermals, but we'll see. Maybe it'll manage. So that's the reason why we're reusing this card. But again, at the end of the video, we're gonna try to stick this bad boy in there as well. So for power delivery, I picked the SF600 from Corsair, Platinum unit. Again, a cancelled project. The person bought it, couldn't get other components, I assume, or just was scrounging for money at the time. So he basically, this was also completely unused. It was bought, probably sat in his place for a couple of weeks, and then he canceled the project and I bought it from him. So very happy about this unit. I think, okay, so NVIDIA touts you need, for an RTX 3080, you should consider a 750 watt power supply. But I think this one, with just a CPU and an SSD, will do just fine as long as we don't overclock the CPU. So I think this would actually work. But I'm not going to test this in this video, but it might be something I want to try out in the future, just to prove my point. If you have an excellent power supply, and this is an excellent power supply, because this only trips over power protection at like 700, or wait, almost 800 watts, I think, was in one of the tests I saw. So that's 200 watts that it can run hotter, or over its specification. You shouldn't probably do it for an extended amount of time, because obviously things will get hot in there. But I think even if you're drawing average 550 and you have 700 watt spikes, this one will be just fine. So it'll be fine for this, in my opinion. So now that we know about the components and what we're trying to achieve, I hope you guys enjoy the B-roll, and I'll see you in the outro. Cheers! And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. As you could probably see in the B-roll, the build is done, it's working, all the components are detected in BIOS. I didn't install Windows yet, but that's going to be the next step, followed by benchmarks. I'm actually quite curious to see the thermals in this case, and I'll make a video about that, so if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe to my channel. You'll get notified about the next video. Anyway, so the build itself was pretty smooth, actually, for an SFF build. Was quite surprised. There were some things that didn't quite pan out as I planned on, but I'll talk about that in a moment. For now, yeah, through the frosted acrylic here you can see the PSU and the CPU side. You can also see that I need to do a lot more cable management, and yeah. One of the things that didn't quite pan out as I wanted it to is I didn't manage to get this fan in there. With the tray being in the lower position to have the room for the radiator, it's just not an option in my opinion. I'll show you why. So conveniently the panel is already off on this side. As you can see, down here is where the fan would go. And with the power cables coming out of the PSU right here, it's just not gonna work. And even in the higher position, I think you'd strongly want to consider putting fan grill on the inside, because otherwise you're gonna have all these cables sticking straight into the fan blades. And also the 3.5-inch drive that they advertise could fit in here is also only really gonna work with the cabling if you were in the higher tray position. So in which case you're not gonna have space to put a radiator with fans in there. So with that being said, another thing that that I didn't mention in the intro actually is the custom cables. So I did use custom cables, and I used silicone ones. Not braided ones, because they're just so much easier to work with, particularly in SFF builds. And I highly recommend getting custom length cables if you can. They do cost a pretty penny, if we're gonna be honest, for just cables. But yeah, it's so much less hassle if the cables are just at the right length. For this build I actually used a reference lengths from the Geek A60 and from the S1 Ghost, the Luke S1 Ghost, to determine how long my CPU EPS cable, PCIe cables, and the 24-pin ATX cable need to be. I can actually post it. I would add another centimeter to the ATX cable actually, and the PCIe cables only really worked out for me. And that brings me to my next point, because I use these doodads. So these are like PCIe Power U extensions. It's essentially, you stick it into the PCIe power connector and it runs through a PCB. It's connected to a female on the other side, and then you plug whatever you need in there. So it's just a power extension, like a power extension cable that you can get, but in form of a small PCB with the traces just connecting from one side to the other. And it's really awesome because, as you can see, it takes up very, very little extra space in height. And yeah, these are like a couple of bugs. Important to note, some manufacturers have the clip on this side, some manufacturers have the clip on the PCB side. So these come in two variants. If you get the wrong variant, you'll end up with a plug that will try to plug itself this way, which will not work because obviously it'll go into the graphics card cooler. So be mindful, make sure you get the right plug, the right orientation for whatever graphics card you're trying to use it on. Talking about graphics card. So this MSI Armor GTX 1070 Ti. is definitely not the best choice for this case. One of the things that's really annoying to me is the fin stack is oriented along the length of the card. Can't fault the card for that particularly, but in this build it would have been so much better if it ran along the width of the card instead of along the length, because now the heat gets expelled here, and here it's gonna get a bit trapped. If it were to run up and down, at least half of it would go straight into the fans and push through the radiator here, and it would be much less of a heat trap. But what can I do? I'm just reusing it from an old build. And the next thing is how tall this card is, essentially, or how wide, if we're going to be more accurate, I think. Because you can see the PCIe bracket ends about here, and the card is almost a good 2 inches taller than that, which, again, without these, I would not have managed to plug a cable in here and not have it go straight into the fans of this radiator. So that was good planning on my part, but I knew this would be a tight fit in the first place. Also, the PCIe cables, the reference length that I used would not have worked with this, because they just about reach the extension, but they wouldn't have been able to make another bend, which would have been another 1 or 2 centimeters. So yeah, that's that. But it all worked out in the end. Again, not with this fan though, but I do plan on trying this case in just the airflow mode in the future, where I'll not be using the radiator, but instead just use a low profile CPU cooler and have only 2 fans on the top and 2 fans on the bottom, which will allow me to put the tray into the top position as well. I'm quite curious how that's gonna work out. So now for the last caveat for this video. I did say I would try to put this card into this case. After seeing how the GTX 1070 Ti MSI Armor is already struggling, particularly with this tube from the radiator, because this was already pretty much a very tight fit here. And the TUF RTX 3080 is a good bit longer. I'm actually not even sure if the length will clear in this case, but I think it should. But the problem is it's almost as wide as this card as well, and that just won't work here with this tube from the radiator. So once I do the airflow version of this, where I won't have a radiator in there, I think I'm still gonna try to put this sucker in there. I just want to see if it fits. For now, since I don't want to go out on like such a downer, and I know some people might have looked forward to it because I mentioned it in the intro, I'm instead gonna try with this conveniently placed RTX 2080 from ZZAW. And when we look at it and we align the PCIe bracket, it's significantly lower in profile, and I think it should clear in length. So at the end of the video, at least we're gonna try this one. That's it for this month's build. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. And with that being said, I hope to see you again in the next video. This was Julian with Mainstream PC. Cheers.